Already started.
Already started? All right. We're in the lecture. Yep, half of them, please. So the ones up here we can see. All right. Yep. So just like that. All right. So our lecture for today is on what causes Europe to go to war. 3 ways you may take notes on this. Number 1 is download the PowerPoint and go to click to take notes and write your notes right there. I think that is the best way to do it because you have your PowerPoint notes all in the same spot. That's one way you could take notes. Another way you could take notes is Word document. Have a Word document open and type. You have your book notes. So you have a choice. Either open up a separate Word document and call that World War I lecture, or hit return a couple times where you were typing your book notes and put lecture on the same Word document. And the old-fashioned way, if you want to write with pens and pencils in your notebook, you can. If anybody wants a feather and ink, please let me know and I'll see if I can get one of those for you.
Oh, I want one.
Uh-oh, really? Now I actually have to do it.
That's pretty cool.
All right, so why does Europe go to war in World War I? Now, the way I'm designing my PowerPoint slides, I'm changing these up just a little bit. You got a picture right here, you got your title, and I'm going to put the key ideas you need to know. Next time you guys give a PowerPoint presentation in front of the class, we'll follow this format. So you have kind of like the big ideas, but not everything about it. So we're looking at World War I. There's 4 main reasons why war begins in Europe. Nationalism, imperialism, alliance, and assassination. Those are the 4 big reasons. If I was typing, I'd write these 4 out right now, and then I'd start putting the notes for here, the notes for here, the notes for here, underneath in a Word document. Or any PowerPoint.
Or on my notebook.
Yeah, if you're old-fashioned. So, now, nationalism. One thing about, we're going to start off with nationalism, is we think of nations like Germany and Italy, that they've been around forever. But America is actually quite a bit older than the modern nation of Germany and Italy as a country. 1860, the year before the Civil War started. Germany was not a country. Italy was not a country. These nations kind of come in late. So they come in late. But when they start, just like the other countries in Europe, there is a great deal of nationalism they have. Now, what exactly does nationalism mean? What word's in there?
Nation.
Nation's in there. So what does it mean if you're nationalistic or if you have nationalism? Let's do a show of hands in here. Who in this room is proud to be Mexican? You have some nationalism. Who's proud to be Ecuadorian? You have nationalism. Does that make sense? So, who's proud to be Puerto Rican? You have some nationalism too. So, nationalism just means basically you're proud of, I'm German.
Oh.
Yes, I do have some pride, but I also have some, wish there's some things we wouldn't have done.
Me too.
So, nationalism means that you're proud of your people. Does that make sense? Now, that can be a really good thing. It can unify you with other people. It can connect you with other people. But it can also make you think that you're better than your neighbor. In Europe, the countries were very nationalistic at this time. People in Britain were very proud to be British. People in France were very proud to be French. Germany, very proud to be Germany. I guess Austria-Hungarian, very proud to be Austria-Hungarian. Hungarian. So, they were very proud of who they were. Does that make sense? Now, this pride gets them kind of in like a rivalry. This pride, well, in combination with greed and trying to make money. Nationalism leads to imperialism. At this time, this was during what's called the Industrial Revolution. We talked about Carnegie. We talked about Rockefeller. There were people like them in Europe too at this time. There were big factories that were going in Europe, and what do the big factories need to have?
Workers.
Workers, yes, but what else do they need to have
Money?
from other countries?
Resources.
Resources. They needed resources from other countries. Where did Europe go for their imperialism, which we also call colonialism? Where was the main, in the early 1900s? Africa. Europe went into Africa. We looked at a map last time, but if you look at French, where the French were in Africa, they were mostly in Western Africa. This explains why a friend of mine, his name's Jorgen, he actually works at Buena Vista University. His first language is French. And that's because late 1800s, early 1900s, the French were in control of West Africa, the nation that he's from. And even to this day, French is the national language. So, Europe was taking over Africa. England was in India. There were parts of Asia, Indonesia that were taken over. The Dutch even came in. So there's this rivalry. Nations think they're better than each other, and they're trying to get more colonies. They're trying to get more resources so they can be richer. It's kind of like they're in competition with each other. They have a big rivalry. Another example of rivalry. Who in here hates it if I even say the word Chivas? No America fans in here?
No, America sucks.
Okay. Who in here gets really mad when I say that America's a great soccer team? Anyone get mad about that? Okay, a couple of you don't.
Just say some football stuff.
So the rivalry is not as intense in this room. So there's rivalries, kind of like a Chivas-America rivalry. Imperialism, but they're trying to take over more and more land. Does that make sense? What this leads to is our next point is the alliances that form. What's an alliance?
Isn't it like,
Go ahead.
isn't it like when people get together, countries get together and they form like,
Countries get together, you're on the right path.
and they form like, kind of like enemies with other people?
They form together, they're enemies of common people. Jorge?
When countries link together and they have formed like a friendship and they agree to
Good.
they get attacked.
Countries link together. If I get attacked, I'll defend you. It's like a bad reality show, like Survivor, The Biggest Loser. You'll sometimes see alliances forming. That also happened with the countries. And our alliances that we really need to know, the first one is, who are the Central Powers? I'll just tell you. Got it here. Yep. Central Powers, Ottoman Empire, Austria-Hungary Empire, and Germany. Think of a couple empires in Germany. Austria-Hungary Empire, Ottoman Empire, and Germany. Also, this is online, so you can watch it again if you miss anything. Continuing now, who are the Allied powers?
Follow me on Twitter.
Let's say follow me on Twitter. Allied powers, we had France, Britain, and oddly enough, that we wouldn't think of this today, but Russia. Those were the Allied powers that were together, the main Allied powers. So, basically like we did in our demonstration, they have each other's back. They're going to defend each other. If there's a war, they have alliances together. What this leads to, it ends up meaning if a big spark happens or a fight happens, we don't have a small little war or a war between two countries, which is relatively small. We'll now have a great, huge, big war that'll happen. One more thing to add here with the alliances, we have to talk about military buildup at this time. Military buildup. Yep, militarism. You can add that too. It's not one of our main points up there, but you can add militarism. Militarism pretty much means at this time, the countries were building up their militaries. They were building up their militaries. A good example of this, France and Germany. From 1870 to 1914, the armies of France and Germany doubled. The number of people, the standing armies, in France and Germany doubled from 1870 to 1914. 1914, first year of the war. So from 1870 to 1914, France and Germany doubled their military size. Navies, we have a picture here of, this is actually from Canada, but the pride of the world is the British Navy. Navies grow tremendously at this time. Britain has the best navy in the world at this time. Britain. In fact, the British Navy is 2.5 times larger than the next biggest country's navy. So their navy at this time is 2.5 times bigger than the next country. Why do you think a country like Britain would want a huge navy?
Because they want to overcome people.
They can go from place to place quickly with lots of weapons. If you're taking over lots of colonies, would you need a big navy?
Yeah.
Yep, it gives you your military, it gives you your strength, that you can go from place to place. So, Britain has a huge navy. Germany starts developing their navy, and they get stronger. And we'll talk a little later how they developed the U-boat, the submarine, which while they don't have as big of a navy, it becomes extremely powerful weapon at this time. And this brings up to our last point, which is the big one, and that is assassination. This one you should know because we went over the notes over this a little bit together, but who is the person who gets assassinated at this time?
The king of the Austrian Hungarian Empire.
Soon to be king, Archduke Franz Ferdinand. So, Archduke Franz Ferdinand gets shot. Where does he get shot?
The limb. No, I'm just kidding. In the car.
He gets shot in the car after the bomb bounces off the hood and they keep driving. I would have stopped and went home at that point. But they're like, well, no, we'll just keep driving. And then he gets shot. He gets shot by a Bosnian. Some people would say a nationalist. Some people would say terrorist. He gets shot by a Bosnian because Bosnia was part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. They didn't want to be part of it anymore. So he gets shot, and what does this lead to?
A war.
It leads to a big, huge war. Like Bosnia, Serbia takes their side, Russia takes their side, France, Britain gets sucked into it, Germany, Austro-Hungarian Empire, Ottoman Empire, and all of a sudden we're digging huge trenches in the middle of France and fighting a 4-year war with dozens of countries involved. The Archduke was assassinated on June 18th, 1914. June 28th, my mistake, June 28th. Yep.
What year?
June 28th, I'm butchering this, 1914. June 28th, 1914 is when Archduke Franz Ferdinand is assassinated. And this leads to, shortly after that, the war begins. Any questions? Okay. We will move on and start our next slide and see how far we get into this. Okay. All right, the United States. Now, I titled this Not Really Neutral because the way you want to think about the U.S.'s role early in the war, they were neutral, but they weren't treating both sides the same. They weren't fighting. They didn't have troops on the ground. They weren't knowing when the U.S. was dying for this war, but they weren't actually really neutral. What side does the U.S. eventually take? The Allied side. The U.S. will eventually take the Allied side. Now we're going to look at this man who's the president at this time, Woodrow Wilson.
The U.S. or somewhere else?
The U.S. So the United States was not really neutral. We're going to look at the president of the United States, Woodrow Wilson. Now, Woodrow Wilson did not want to enter the war. He was pretty reluctant. He didn't want to enter the war. He declared the U.S. to be neutral, and he was even, so the war starts in 1914. The U.S. is not in the war in the beginning.
1940.
Yep. So, he saw this time period as the United States to try to grow. They kind of got out of their economic depression. Part of the reason why the U.S. was able to get out of the economic depression you guys read about in chapter 12, who are they manufacturing and selling weapons to? No?
To everybody.
Oh, to everybody in the war.
To everybody in the war, especially to the Allied powers. So the U.S. is kind of sitting on the sidelines